Hey everybody, welcome to Conversation Piece with Patrick Armstrong. I am the titular Patrick, and this is a show where we talk about the missing pieces of the conversations we're already having. Special shout out to all our returning listeners, and a high five and hello to everyone joining us for the very first time. Thank you so much. My guest today is a lifestyle guide helping people help themselves align and elevate their spiritual, business, and wellness lifestyles. She's also the founder of ShowLux Lifestyle Center, which was created as a center for information, resources, support, and like-minded community. She's also based right here in Indianapolis like myself. It is an honor and a privilege to welcome Jamie Holland to the show. Hey, Jamie, thanks for joining me.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you here. For listeners, just a little background. Just connected with Jamie very recently. I attended a book release, I believe,
Yes,
for her book, Mindful Moments. It's a guided workbook, and it was a really, really lovely event, and I really resonated with a lot of the stuff that Jamie shared. Knew that I had to have her on the podcast here, knew that I had to explore this conversation around mindfulness, so very, very excited to have you here and be able to jump into that conversation.
I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. And Jamie's also joining me not from Indianapolis, but from a library in a smaller town just outside of Indy. And so want to thank you for that privilege of your time and of your energy and your space to be able to have this conversation. So I know that I introduced you a little bit, but for anybody listening who may not know who you are, do you mind sharing just a little bit more about yourself?
So I'm Jamie. I think you kind of covered it all, but I do like to help people. I like to be a guide. Like I like to show you the way, you know? And outside of that, I enjoy spending time at the libraries. So this is kind of like my jam. And that's kind of it.
Well, I know that, I have not spent enough time in libraries recently, and I know that's one of the things that I want to make more of a habit. And I think that's something that, I don't know if we'll cover it today in this conversation, but I think has to do a little bit with the mindfulness that we show ourselves as we go about navigating our daily lives. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. When I reached out to you to ask what kind of conversation that you wanted to have, you're talking about mental health in the workplace. And I want to know what part or piece of that particular conversation do you feel like we're missing right now?
Right now, I feel like we are missing, even though it seems like it's like out there. I feel like we're missing like workplace wellness, like programs in place to actually help us. Like a lot of people, like community centers and just a lot of places, period, claim to help with mental health and mental wellness. But as far as like work goes and like dealing with people on a regular basis and just, you know, being like empathic people and just like helpful people, period. Like we kind of need like that extra protection, especially if we're going to be in the work world, you know?
100%.
Yeah. And I just feel like workplaces aren't really catering to the wellness of our minds. Not really.
Can you share a little bit of your experience navigating that space for yourself, and when you first noticed, like, oh, these workplaces are not necessarily for me or my mental health right now?
It's been a long time ago. So I have a son. His name is Hugh, and he's 14. He'll be 15 this year. And in the beginning of my parenting journey, I would say, like, I know a lot of parents have gone through it, just like trying to find babysitters and just trying to work and take care of the household, you know, especially as like single people, you know.
Sure.
And so that was when I first noticed, like, the job I was working at, they just wanted me to be there just to say that we have people here. Like, we didn't have anything to do. It was a holiday. And I'm like, my son really needs me, you know, and he's kind of like looking for me to be here. And I have to live in this fear of maybe not being able to pay my bills because I want to be with my family,
Right.
or, losing my job because they don't really care. Like I had a job tell me basically that it wasn't their problem, which it's not. I get it. It's not their problem. However, like, I need to be able to be sane. Like, I need to be able to think. I need to be able to focus so that I can come in here and do what it is that you're asking me to do, you know?
100%. And I feel like when people say, well, it's not my problem, generally they're fueling what is causing the issue, or not
Exactly.
providing the right kind of support. Like you said, you are not only taking care of yourself, you're taking care of your son. And then you have all the exterior factors of like, how am I paying this bill? Or how am I getting my son to where he needs to go? Or whatever appointments, how are we making sure we're making those? And if a workplace isn't providing that kind of support, then it kind of does become their problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that just goes to this societal viewpoint of work as being workers or cogs in this machine. And so it's like, oh, well, we'll replace you. And it's like, well, you hired me for a reason.
Exactly.
And so why wouldn't you invest in me instead of just churning and burning to a new person?
Right.
And so once you made the decision that you're like, okay, I need to do something different, or I need to pivot to somewhere else, how did you start to approach that individually? And then how did that influence or guide your specific path to whatever career that you wanted to pursue next?
That's a really good question. So I feel like I just really started to feel it. Like, this is just like, I understand, like, this is what we have to do, but like, I am not feeling this. Like, it makes my stomach hurt to even think about coming in here, like, it was making me sick. And so I'm like, there's got to be another way. Like, there has to be. I remember being at work one day and I just looked up and I was like, this is not for me.
Yep.
And I just feel like things kind of started like falling into place. So I was doing hair then, and not really like other people's hair, just kind of like my mom, my sisters, and mine. And so I was like, maybe I'll go to cosmetology school. So I decided to go to cosmetology school. And I was working full time and going to school, and we made it. Okay, let's just say we made it. But that's kind of how I started to approach it. I just kind of like had to have a real conversation with myself. Like, I get that this is what we're supposed to do. However, like, how does this make you feel? And not only that, like, you're raising this young child, and like, how do you explain the workforce to him? Like, do you tell him, well, just go out there and just make money, whatever you have to do for it, because that doesn't feel good, you know? So I just really had to like make some really hard decisions, like, despite what other people felt,
Yeah. And so that obviously with that realization comes like this focus, not only like, okay, I want to address my mental and physical health, like you said, like you were physically ill having to navigate all these things. And it's like, I have to figure out how to take care of myself, and then in turn take care of my family, and then in turn, find whatever that productivity or success might look like for me.
Right.
Is that how you made the pivot towards mindfulness specifically? Or was that another step along the journey that you were on?
I think a little bit of both, because once I graduated cosmetology school, I was working with natural hair, and my hair is thick, like so thick. And so I'm like, I got this. I can help you,
Sure.
I can even make products for you, and then you can take it home and you can start your own regimen at home. So in that practice is when like I started meeting a lot of people who were like, I hate my hair. Like, it's just too much and I just don't know what to do with it. And so I'm like, there's a deeper issue here, and maybe that needs to be addressed. So that's kind of what made me really like dig deeper into like mindfulness, and like just trying to be in this moment and accepting the things that are going on around me as they are, and not feeling like animosity towards it, So I think that was like the first moment where I noticed that this is what I have to do.
That's so interesting. Do you recall any specific conversations when you were doing hair specifically, or like right as you were in that journey, that you were, like you said, you kind of the generalized, like, okay, there are deeper issues here. Do you remember any specific, like, things that people were sharing that you're like, okay, I'm making a note of this as something that I should focus on later?
Well, okay, so I went into cosmetology school, kind of know what I was doing, but a lot of people would ask for two-strand twists. And I was like, this is so easy. For one, I like to do it. It's easy money, it's quick, and it was all the things. Two-strand twist was my jam.
Okay.
And so people would come in and be like, I try to do this at home and like it looks nothing like this. And so I could just hear and like feel the frustration,
Yeah.
And maybe it wasn't like a specific conversation because a lot of the conversations kind of were the same.
Sure.
And that's kind of what made me notice.
Sure. I love that. And I think that it's something that maybe a lot of us aren't quick to recognize if we don't find ourselves, one, having that feeling within our own corporate spaces or whatever workplaces that we find ourselves in, and then two, transitioning out into like doing our own thing.
Yes.
Like, because we're sitting on both sides of that experience, and so we can approach it from multiple perspectives. So you have these conversations, you're like, okay, there are things here that we need to be talking about that nobody seems to be talking about. When did you decide, like, I'm going to be the one that talks about them?
That's a really interesting question because I was thinking about this the other day. Like, how did I get here? Seriously. I feel called, I feel led, and something inside of me just makes me keep going in a certain direction. And I just almost feel like I can't stop no matter how like frustrated I may get about the things around me that may be happening. I just feel like I can't stop. It's something in me I'm called.
I love that. I love it because it's like you said, you know what you want to do. And even though, and that calling has probably always been there. Even when you were working for other people, even when you started to work for yourself, when you're in cosmetology school, right out of cosmetology school, it's like, there's this voice in your head. Then it's like, I know what I'm doing right now is not necessarily what I'm supposed to be doing, but maybe I'm on the path to that.
Yes.
And then you hear it, and then those words become articulated to where you're like, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yes.
And so how did all of that lead into the business that you're doing now?
So I feel like my business now just kind of evolved into what it is today. Definitely with a lot of patience and time and alignment, definitely. And just passion. Like, I really love what I do. And I just like, if something comes to me, it's like, okay, I have to get it out. And I'll figure out what medium that is that it needs to get out, and then I'll get it out there. But I know it may sound kind of funny, but it just won't stop.
I don't think that sounds funny at all.
Yeah. So it just kind of evolved. And I just like made a point to really like notice the things that need my attention.
Sure.
So definitely trying to use discernment.
Okay.
Because I'm a giver, so it's easy to just help everybody, But in using discernment, like, I have to help the people that are ready for the help,
Sure. Could you really quickly define discernment for anybody who may not be familiar with the term?
Just for me, like being aware and like noticing like how I feel about certain things or people or situations, and also honoring like the fact that I'm growing and that everybody's not my project anymore, So just understanding what that feels like, what that looks like, that is discernment for me.
I love that definition because normally, and this is what I was thinking, discernment is how for me, and how I would have defined it would be how I am taking stock of other folks or situations. And I love how you've rooted it in like in the self.
Yeah.
Like being able to discern how this is affecting me and like where my energy is going, and like discerning like what I should be doing. What kind of things do I want to invest my time and energy in? I love that. I love that. And so
thank you.
I really appreciate you sharing kind of this journey, this truncated version of your journey up until this point, because I think it lays a good foundation for addressing, this missing piece around mental health in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've talked about you individually. Can you talk a little bit about how we as individuals can approach addressing our mental health in the workplace?
I feel like just being more aware. Like, I feel like a lot of the time we just kind of go with the flow because that's like all we know, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like just being more aware, like when we start to get sick, like all of a sudden, like where did this come from? It's not in my family. I'm a pretty healthy person, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Why do I feel like this? And I really feel like just being more aware.
I think that's great. I think awareness is key to a lot of different things.
Yes.
Not only outside of your external environment, but internally, being aware, self-aware. That self-awareness. Do you have any tips that are in your book or your workbook that we can make sure people go purchase? Anything that you would share with our audience about how they can develop that awareness?
Meditation.
Okay.
Introspection. Sometimes we have to ask ourselves those really hard questions that we don't really want to know the answer to, but we kind of have to. Introspection, I would say, is number one. Like, get to the bottom of it, you know?
I love that. I mean, you have to get to the root of these things. I
Yeah.
was just having a conversation about this the other day, specifically about white supremacy. But like, we have to, if we don't understand the roots, then we'll continue to gloss over the problem,
Exactly.
and we'll only address the symptoms, not the actual thing that's causing the symptoms.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on it.
Exactly. And then you get a scab, and it's like, okay,
Right.
maybe that stops for a little bit.
Yes.
The bleeding stops for a little bit, but then it reoccurs or it scars.
Yeah.
When that happens, we have to be aware of that scar. We have to know not only what that is, but where that came from. And if we understand where that came from, we can be mindful about how we navigate that situation the next time. So hopefully we don't get scarred again.
Right.
So at the beginning of this, you talked about recognizing that workplaces do not have like programs or even just a culture in place to promote, a healthy mental well-being, mental health awareness, all of this stuff. How do corporations, companies, organizations, what do they need to do to make sure they're being mindful of their employees' mental health?
That's an excellent question. I feel like, maybe they could start with a survey,
Okay.
Just see how people are feeling and let them know that it's a safe space. A lot of people, I feel like, don't feel safe at work.
100%.
So
100%.
just let people know, like, this is a safe space, and we want to know because we actually want to help, and we want to, maybe they could like find some options. Like, everything doesn't work for everybody. So, they may need to find some different types of, maybe they should like check their mental health. It starts at the top,
It does.
So, like, how am I feeling? Because if I feel this way, then the people that are working for me, they may possibly feel this way too.
100%. And I think that's a lot of the conversation around like diversity, equity, inclusion right now is that these programs get installed and then it's on generally Black women to run them by themselves with limited resources.
Yes.
And it's like, again, this Band-Aid to more systemic issue. And I love what you said. It starts at the top. So how do these folks, obviously these executive leaders, people in C-suite can use introspection, can do meditation, can do these things. What other ways should they be addressing their own mental health to get at the root of these problems so they can create a healthier, safer work culture and environment?
That, however, I feel like maybe if like the employees weren't treated as just like a number and replaceable, that might be a start. But I know like big corporations, they have to do what they have to do. But still, like, these are people,
Have you had anybody share, like, from an executive level situation, ways that they have went about doing that? Like, how they've figured out a way to address not only their own health and mental health, but the way that they treat and interact with their employees?
That's a good question. I can't say I've had that conversation. I do observe a lot, though.
Okay.
So, in my observations, no, I'm just kidding.
No, I love it.
I've noticed like a couple community centers, like just noticing like their heads and like the community people. like the community leaders, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
They put things in place. I don't know how they are addressing their mental health in private. I do know that like a few places are putting like mental health facilities in place. But when you work for those facilities, it's not really about mental health. So it's almost like a contradiction. And
Okay.
that makes me feel like this is how they are handling their mental health. You know, not really, but kind of, you know, kind of like putting a band-aid on it, or like I don't want to offend anybody, but it's almost like going to church because it's the church or like a building, but like the inside is empty. You know, it's like,
Sure.
I hope I'm explaining that. Like it makes sense in here. I hope you understand like kind of what I'm saying.
No, I think I get it. Let me see if I'm picking it up correctly. I think it's that. I think it's really interesting, the example specifically in the community, because I think what you're saying is like people who lead some of these organizations, some of these community groups set up things for people under the guise of mental health or being supportive.
Yes.
And yet the actions of those organizations, of the things they set up, do not reflect the mission or whatever it is that was stated.
Exactly.
Like the purpose.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I think, I mean, that's something in itself that's probably even a different part of this equation, is when community leaders, people who find themselves in the workplaces trying to, like, struggling to strive and thrive and make it, when they look to community leaders, they want to see that they're going to get that support there. And while the community leaders parrot that they are going to, on the other hand, they're not necessarily backing that up. And a lot of that, I think, is tied up in like funding. And that's another
Definitely.
thing, is that for community leaders, like, I'm assuming, and this is probably wrong of me, but like they've put in so much work to try and get to a position where somebody would be willing to give them money to set something up like that.
Yes.
And so they take that, run with it, and it's great, but then there's no follow through after year one or even year two. And so that's why we see a lot of community things fail, I guess I would say. I hate to say fail, but you know, not do the things that we hoped that they were going to do.
Exactly.
And so I'm going to hype you up a little bit, especially for any organizations out there, particularly here in Indianapolis, that might be listening to this. I don't know if you do this kind of work, but go ahead and hire Jamie to come in and coach your people, coach your executive leadership team, coach your employees, coach on these, how we can develop more mindful workplace culture, more mindful workplace mental health practices, you know, the types of things that we need to do. Because if we're not bringing in people and then paying them for their time and service to teach us these things, we're going to continue to perpetuate, you know, the ills that we find ourselves in.
Exactly.
So hyping you up with that. And I want to ask you one more question about, we talked about, you know, individuals in the workplace, how addressing their own mental health. We've talked about executive leaders addressing their own mental health and then addressing the workplace culture. How do we as individuals, once we've like started to take those steps of addressing our mental health, how do we as coworkers make sure that we're being mindful of our fellow coworkers' mental health in the workplace?
Yes, that's a good one. That's a good one, because that's a really good one. Just taking the time, like so I worked, and I can only speak from my experience. I worked in a small little environment, and it was like 4 of us. And just like being aware of like your time and understanding that like all of us are kind of like in this same, you know, boat. So just being aware that like everybody's kind of dealing with the same issues, and like if I can help you, you know, by maybe coming in a few minutes early and just making sure like we're ready to open, or you know, like small things. It's really the small things that people look at that are like, that was really thoughtful, you know, just being more thoughtful and more kind, and just understanding that we all are here. We're all dealing with kind of like the same things, you know?
Yep. I love that. I think thoughtfulness and kindness are two things that get left out of the workplace a lot. And it's because, and I think a lot of times too, when we address those things within ourselves, like we can see, like we can be like, okay, I've done that work, and then now I'm only focused on myself.
Exactly.
When those things still ripple outwards, and we can potentially create a better, safer environment if we are, extending that kindness, that gratitude, that thoughtfulness, that mindfulness to our fellow coworkers.
Yep.
So I love that. You have like really made a business out of this specific work and addressing these different areas in multiple different kinds of industries too. I love how ShowLux is specifically, it's not just a one-stop thing, or I guess it is like a one-stop shop a little bit, but it's not just like for one group of people. It really does feel open to everyone. Like you said, we're all going through similar things.
Yeah.
So like it should be open, like we should have resources that we can see ourselves and resonate with each other's messaging and things like that. And can you talk a little bit about that specific work? And then can you talk a little bit more about Mindful Moments, the workbook that you just released not too long ago?
So ShowLux Lifestyle Center is just a resource center and like a like-minded community center. It's mostly online, so it's easy to access. If you need some support or some resources, or you want to attend a class, or you want to do a meditation, you want to start your mornings off nice. So ShowLux Lifestyle Center it's mostly for like support and resources and just, to let people know, like, you have a space, you can come if you need to talk, if you need some encouragement, whatever it is, like, this is a safe space. And so Mindful Moments came from all of that, just being more mindful. And me as a guide, I really enjoy the guided workbooks because I feel like like as far as helping people help themselves, it's like it's got worksheets, it's got like other resources, it's got a couple QR codes for you to take you to a different place. It's even got some extra like printable worksheets that you can print off and use later for extra. But I just feel like I feel like the guides are perfect for helping people. Like, you can go like at your own pace,
Yeah.
And the way Mindful Moments was created was so that you can read it from cover to cover, or you can just kind of open it up and whatever calls to you that day, you can just start with that. But one of my favorite parts of the book is practicing gratitude, because there's always like we feel like there's always so much going on around us. Like, for me, practicing gratitude gets me in a space where I can just see the good things, the little things, the things that I am not really noticing because, maybe something else I feel like is more important or bigger. When essentially all these things are bringing us to wherever it is we're supposed to be, whether it's good or bad, or
good, bad, big, small, like,
Exactly.
like you said, and it's sometimes we miss those little things.
Yes.
And when we get caught up, especially in like an emotional response to something, like we get hung up on anger, we get hung up on frustration or grief, and we can miss the opportunity to be grateful or to even just be mindful and think about like the small thing that brought us joy, like just something that your son does, just offhand, like that. It's just like, I just made me really happy, or something like your partner does, whatever it might be. There's a lot of different things, and I really love that. One of the things that I really enjoy about the workbook specifically is that it feels very, and I think you just described this, but feels very empowering to the reader. Like, the person that holds this in their hands, it's not that you are telling them what to do. It's like, here is something that you can work on, and you have the power to do so whenever you want to do it.
Yep, that's exactly the idea.
I think that you have gotten it across very clearly. I love it because I feel like that's, when I was at the event, I felt like that's what I got from the conversations that were had. And then when I was working through the workbook myself, it's like, okay, it feels like this is for me. Like, it's not necessarily Jamie saying, hey, this is my book. Here it is. Like, thank you for reading it. It felt like it was almost collaborative in a way.
Yes. Integrative.
Integrative.
Yes.
Love that. Integrative. I like that. So one of the things that I really loved about this conversation is just how not only you've like developed your learning style individually, but how you've translated that into becoming a leader, becoming a teacher, educator, whatever it might be, a lifestyle guide, a workbook, a workshop facilitator. You know, you're doing a lot of things where you provide and share knowledge and education with folks. Who are you learning from right now?
Right now, that's a good question. Right now, I'm really like learning from my younger child, my inner child.
Oh, okay.
Because I feel like we all can learn a lot from our inner child. You know, for one, children are needy, you know. So what is it that I need, you know?
Yeah.
That maybe I haven't received, or maybe at this stage and age in my life I am able to provide, you know, that feels good to me. That's one person I feel like, because I need to know, I feel like if my cup is full, then I have it to give to somebody else. But if my cup is empty, I just don't have it to give.
Right.
So I've really been trying to get more in tune. And another person or people that I feel like I'm learning from right now are community leaders, just in general, just the community leaders. They are interesting, and they are interesting.
I love it. I love it. I love learning from community leaders 100%. I'm trying to do a lot more of that right now here in Indianapolis.
Yes.
I really love your answer about your inner child, learning from your inner child. That might be the best answer I've gotten to this question since I started doing this podcast. So
Nice.
it's one of definitely the most unique answer, and I don't know. I never know what to expect when I ask, because people, like, there's so many people to learn from, and I'm selfishly, I'm like, I want to learn from these people too. So
Right.
tell me who I need to learn from, and then I'm
Right.
going to go out and do it. So, but yeah, I absolutely love that. That's amazing. Jamie, this has been a fantastic conversation. My first conversation, I'll just lay this on you now. My first conversation was someone locally here, and I'm planning to do more of these conversations locally in Indianapolis, finding the folks who are doing things in all different industries and who are addressing these missing pieces of all these different conversations that we're having. So I really appreciate, again, you giving me the time and privilege to have this conversation with you. And as we get ready to close it out, we talked about show looks and we talked about mindful moments. What are the best ways to support you right now going forward?
Right now, just check out the website. Like, I'm sure you'll find something that, you know, you may find interesting. It's a lot of reading material. So, you know, when you're chilling, if you just want to, you know, just go check out the website.
Amazing. Well, we will have the website linked right here in the show notes, so you'll be able to check that out. You'll also be able to go pick up a copy of Mindful Moments.
Yes.
If you want to pick up a copy of that,
Yes.
we'll have that linked in the show notes as well. Jamie, again, I cannot thank you enough for sitting down to have this conversation. I literally walked up to her at her signing table when I had a copy of this. I'm like, hey, I host a podcast. Would you be interested? And she said yes immediately. And again, like I said at the top, like really resonated with this message of mindfulness, something that I've been thinking about a lot as I not only do my own individual work, but think about how I want to navigate the community, how I want to be involved in the community, and not just mine, but all of the different ones that make up Indianapolis, that make up Indiana, that make up the society that we live in.
Yes.
So I really, really appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, it is a pleasure, and we will definitely have you back when more workbooks come out or when new updates come out. So we will definitely be bringing you back on the show. For everybody else who's out there listening, you can find, again, all the links to everything that we just talked about here in the show notes. You can also find us on Instagram at Conversation Podpiece. And if you feel inclined to leave a rating or review for our podcast on whatever player you're listening to this on right now, we would greatly appreciate it. Lastly, if you're ever interested in supporting the show in the future in any way, feel free to hop in our DMs or visit our website, conversationpiece.com. Until next time, I'm Patrick Armstrong, and this has been Conversation Piece. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.